Talking some baseball a couple of times this hour, including now. We welcome in our next guest. He is a writer for MLB.com. You can follow him on Twitter.com/Adam D. Barry. It is Adam Barry. Hey, Adam, how you doing?
Hey, doing good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on the program. Now, we, of course, up here in Montreal, Canada, taking great interest in your recent story on MLB.com concerning Vladimir Guerrero, of course, a favorite here in this city during his time with the Montreal Expos, and you had a chance recently to chat with him.
Yeah, I sat down with Vladimir and his representative, Orlando Ventura, over at the Bobby Maddock Training Center in Dunedin, where he's working his way back to the majors pretty quickly, from what I understand, with the Toronto Blue Jays. He signed a little bit earlier this month, and he got right back in extended spring training, took some batting practice, did some very, very Vlad Guerrero things, bashing some home runs about 500 feet away, and looked like the same old Vlad.
Now, obviously, the knock on him last year is under 300 average. He did have a 293 batting average, so that's pretty darn good in 145 games. The speed, obviously, not there anymore, and some people question whether or not he can play outfield any longer. We all think back to that World Series a couple of years ago with the Rangers, but your impressions seeing him up close as to whether or not he could still field?
I think that is a very important issue to him, more importantly, because last year he was strictly a designated hitter with the Orioles, and he came back in and he said, I want to work out and be in game shape in case they need me in the outfield. Now, John Farrell, manager of the Blue Jays, basically said he will be a designated hitter, but, with the way versatility is so highly valued in the majors these days, knowing that he can play, knowing that you can throw him out in left field for a couple of innings, obviously pretty important, and he worked out for four or five innings in his first extended spring game in left field. So, yeah, I don't know if the athleticism is there quite like it used to be, obviously, but, that's the nature of the beast for a 37-year-old slugger.
Now, obviously, Vladimir Guerrero's been around Major League Baseball a very, very long time, and my question to you is, he knows English. He knows English, he speaks it, he just doesn't like to do it with the media.
Right.
When you were asking him questions, did he have to have those translated, or is he just answering you in Dominican? In Spanish?
Essentially, he would answer most things in Spanish, just understanding what I would say in English. And honestly, the funny thing is, on our way, we were walking off the field, on our way to go sit down at a table and talk into the interview. We kind of, did a little back and forth in English. He understood, and he'd laugh, and he'd, crack a little joke. So, I think the concern is more than anything, he doesn't want to be misunderstood, or he doesn't want to poorly represent himself with the media, because, that obviously is an issue, that if you don't feel you can properly communicate your answers in the best way, especially with something like this, where he's talking about a pretty major issue of him coming back and the whole controversy with his former agents and everything. So I think, like you said, he's been around baseball a long time. He knew what I was saying. It's just, I think it was more important for him to be understood properly rather than, to appease me as an interviewer.
Chatting with Adam Barry of MLB.com on his recent sit-down with Vladimir Guerrero, and this was the most interesting part of that piece, Adam, was the fact that he was actually offered a contract by the Blue Jays. He was with another agency and then switched agents. The old agents didn't tell him that he actually got an offer from the Jays, and that's why he wasn't signed until recently. Unbelievable. Yeah,
that's kind of an interesting thing. Obviously every agency has a reason for the things they do, and maybe they thought it wasn't, a worthy offer. There's a lot of things that go into that kind of decision. But the thing that Vlad said is that he would have jumped at an offer with a guaranteed invitation to spring training. He had a couple of other offers from, I believe it was the Indians and the D-backs, and maybe I think it was Kansas City, where he could have gone in, he could have tried it out, but he had nothing guaranteed in concrete, that he would have definitely made it on. And it seemed like the Blue Jays were interested in that from the very beginning, just for depth, if nothing else. So, he would have jumped at the opportunity, and then, he cut his association with his former agency, SFX, and then jumped on with Proformans with Bean Stringfellow and Orlando Ventura. They got it worked out, and I believe it was $1.3 million, which will be prorated whenever he reaches majors, which should be sometime in the middle of June, I think they're saying.
Now, you talked about the fact you mentioned in the article about the fact that Guerrero is looking to try and get to 500 home runs. He's obviously a couple of seasons away from doing that. But was there any talk about him having a goal of, let's say, getting to the Baseball Hall of Fame or anything like that? Or was it strictly about, or winning a World Series, or was it just about the home runs?
There was a little bit. That was probably the most surprising thing he said. Was I asked him, you've accomplished so much. He has the most hits of any player in the majors born in the Dominican. Realistically, you look at his statistics and his accomplishments, and he could be a Hall of Famer. But he's never won the World Series. I was a little surprised that he didn't mention that. Yeah, that the first thing he said is that I want to get 51 more home runs, so I have 500. That's what this is all about. But I mean, everybody has their priorities, and maybe that's what's important to him, is that round 500 number.
Any thought about Blue Jay teammates? Anybody he mentioned specifically that he's looking forward to playing with?
No, honestly, we didn't really talk a whole lot about about when he gets to the majors, because his whole focus when he was there was strictly just on working and getting back into game shape and getting ready to get back to the majors. Because I mean, the thing is, when they sign that kind of deal, there obviously is no guarantee that he will reach the majors. It looks like with the way things are going for the Blue Jays right now, with some of the releasing or designating Adam Lind and all that stuff, they will have a roster spot for him. But essentially, when you signed that deal, there was no guarantee that he'd come back. It's just like what the Rays did recently with Hideki Matsui. So his focus now is get back into game shape, prove that he can hit, show that he can play a little defense. So he's a little more versatile and valuable to them. But I think he really is focused on what he's going now here in Dunedin.
Yeah, I think so as well. And the interesting thing, too, of course, in Major League Baseball is you have those expanded rosters in September. So even if things don't go his way, you'll still see him at some point, especially if the Blue Jays are in the wild card contention.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the Blue Jays, it's funny, it's a very similar situation to what just happened down here with the Rays and Hideki Matsui. I think the Blue Jays see that if they don't have a space for him by a certain time and Vlad is getting interest from other teams, they probably would let him pursue those other opportunities where he could latch on a roster spot before September if a team had an opening. I think it's sort of a professional respect that they have for a guy with that kind of career. It's the same thing with Matsui here in Tampa, where they would let him pursue that opportunity if it arose somewhere else.
We're chatting with Adam Berry of MLB.com, who recently sat down with Vladimir Guerrero down in Dunedin, Florida, as Guerrero tries to make his way back to Major League Baseball. Did you talk a little bit about what he was doing previous to heading into Florida and Dunedin? What was he doing to stay in shape, possibly in the Dominican?
Yeah, he was working out quite a bit in the Dominican. He had a trainer down there. Everything. It's funny that you mentioned defense so quickly in this interview, because that was a big focus for him. He was saying, I want to get back into shape to where I can play the outfield, pretty regularly. So it's been on his mind. And, he had a long off season, so he had plenty of time to get ready for it. But yeah, he was working and staying in shape, and hitting for Vlad obviously is never really an issue. He's gonna hit the baseball the way he always has. So I think staying in shape and staying in potentially defensive shape was an issue for him, just in case maybe a National League offer did come around.
One of the reports on Guerrero in the off season, or at least at the beginning of this season, was the fact that the Indians offered him a tryout and they didn't end up signing him. Did you chat about that at all?
We didn't mention that a whole lot. He mentioned that they had an offer, but just that there wasn't a guaranteed invitation to spring training. There wasn't a guaranteed Major League spring invite. So when a guy gets that, there's obviously going to be significantly less interest on his part, especially early. I think he realized, he has had a good enough career, and he has. I mean, the thing is, it's not with him. It's not just about the career. He has been good recently. You mentioned he didn't hit 300 last year, but I mean, look at what he did in Texas the year before that at the plate. He is still a very qualified, very talented hitter. So I think with that in mind, he was looking for something a little more guaranteed and a little more deserving of what he's done.
And finally, obviously, he's going back to playing in Canada, where he last played in 2003 for the Expos. Any mention of playing in Canada?
Well, I know he seemed excited about that, because obviously that was where he where he sort of made his name there in Montreal. So I think it's a very neat story, the fact that he might end his career, sort of back where he started, in a little bit of a roundabout way. But I mean, those fans were good to him, and I believe he hopes they'll be good to him in Toronto as well.
Well, the article was fantastic. MLB.com is the website. Always great to check out what's happening with former Montreal Expos players, as well as just icons and players that always have a bit of cachet, guys like Guerrero. Adam Berry, you can follow him on twitter.com/AdamDBerry. Adam, thanks so much for chatting with us. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.